What we know as Greek mythology today is the collective of a series of works by poets like Hesiod, Homer, Herodotus, Euripides, Hyginus, and Sophocles. Pretty much every myth you've heard of originates from one of these poets, and even myths you've never heard of before. Now, if you watched my iceberg video about Greek deities, you've no doubt heard me mention several epic poems from these old dead dudes, but I've never got into extreme detail about any of them. So in this video, we're going to be going over one of the poems I referenced the most, Hesiod's Theogony. Theogony, also known as the Origin of Gods, is a massive poem and is about 10,000 words, which would make for a 1-hour video if I were to read it word for word, probably over that. The poems you've heard probably aren't that long, but this is an epic poem, so it's a little different. So it has to take an hour to read, because reasons. This is also one that has to be this long because Hesiod is trying to do a monumental task. Hesiod was trying to write about all of the beings and creatures of myth in one singular story. Marvel says they made the world's most ambitious crossover, but Hesiod squeezed in 300 gods, some monsters, and even took the time to tell you the name of all the Nereids, and no one asked him to do it. But why? Well, all these myths existed long before Hesiod ever wrote about them, and the origin myth, also known as the Orphic myth, existed hundreds of years before Hesiod was thinking about writing of them. So Hesiod was doing it to archive these stories, and it's a good thing he did. Even if it comes across as a shopping list of gods at times, Hesiod gave us important footnotes about every single god. Hesiod basically wrote my iceberg for me before I did by about 2,500 years. This story serves as basically a fancifully worded family tree. But look at this. Look at all of this. You don't want me to read all of this out. Here's the first few paragraphs, and tell me if this is something you want me to read in full. Begin our singing with the Heliconian muses, who possess Mount Helicon, high and holy, and near its violet-stained spring on petal-soft feet, dance circling the altar of almighty Cronion. And having bathed their silken skin in Permessos or in Horse Spring or the sacred creek of Olmios, they begin their choral dance on Helicon's summit. So lovely it pangs, and with power in their steps ascend veiled and misted in palpable air, treading the night, and in a voice beyond beauty they chant, Zeus, Aegis holder, and his lady Hera of Argos, in gold sandals striding, and the Aegis holder's girl, owl-eyed Athena, and Phoebos Apollo, and arrowy Artemis, Poseidon Earthholder, earthquaking god, modest Themis, and Aphrodite, eyelashes curling, and Hebe, or Hebe, I'm not gonna say how to pronounce it, gold-crowned and lovely Dione, Leto and Iepidos, and Kronos, his mind bent, Eos and Helios, and glowing Selene, Gaia, Oceanos, and the Black One, Night, and the whole eerie brood of the eternal immortals, and they once taught Hesiod the art of singing verse while he pastured his lambs on holy Helicon slopes. And this was the very first thing they told me. The Olympian muses, daughters of Zeus Aegis holder, hillbillies and bellies, poor excuses for shepherds. We know how to tell many believable lies, but also, when we want to, how to speak the plain truth. So spoke the daughters of great Zeus, mincing their words, and they gave me a staff, a branch of good sappy laurel, plucking it off. Spectacular. And they breathed into me a voice divine, so I might celebrate the past and future. And they told me to hymn the generation of eternal gods, but always to sing of themselves, the muses, first and last. That was just the first 35 lines. There are still 1,000 to go, and all the first 35 did was set up how Hesiod received divine inspiration to write this down. This is going to sound harsh, but to me this reads like Lovecraft's Unknown Kadath, a short story that had no punctuation or line breaks. But that wasn't a bug. That was a feature. This kind of reads similar, in that it's boring. The real value of Hesiod's Theogony is it sets up the creation myth for Greek myth, as well as other significant myths like the Titanomachy, the castration of Uranus, Aphrodite's birth, and the like. I don't personally believe that Greek myth has a canon, but if I did, the Theogony is it. The creation myth takes a little while to get to, about 100 lines later. You can tell this wasn't during the YouTube and TikTok era. Hesiod wasn't concerned even a little bit with how fun or engaging Theogony was to read. But Theogony isn't too bad if you take it how it's presented as a series of myths stitched together into one story. Like a compilation of short stories. The first one, the first gods. In the beginning, like way in the beginning, in school, when they told you about Greek mythology, they probably started at or after the Titanomachy, where Zeus deposes his father Cronus. But in Theogony, we start at the absolute beginning. Before Olympians, before Titans, before man, there is only chaos, the primordial of chaos. Chaos is the origin of everything. Hesiod portrayed chaos as not just a place, a state of being, but also a being herself. The next line says Gaia came into being, not really explaining how. We're just gonna assume, poof, she appeared. Gaia is the earth. Good old terra firma, the dirt you stand on, the globe. Then came Tartarus. Tartarus is like hell. It's a deep abyssal prison of suffering for evil, and later is used as a prison for the Titans. Again, Hesiod describes them as both a being and a place. Next was Eros, the primordial of love. Eros was the loveliest, and made the primordials feel weak alongside humans, weakening their wills. Eros is the concept of love and was so strong that even formless gods were weak against his will. From chaos, this time birth was confirmed. From chaos came Erebos and Nyx. If you played Hades, you know Nyx. Nyx is the night itself, and Erebos is darkness. A better match between the two you'd struggle to find. And soon, Nyx was with Erebos' child, Aether and Hemera. Hemera is day, and Aether is dawn. Kind of funny how the two beings who represent the void of light created light and almost light. Earth's first child was Ouranos. Starry heaven, just her size, a perfect fit on all sides, and a firm foundation for the blessed gods, says Hesiod. This refers to Gaia creating Ouranos, later called Uranus. Uranus was the sky itself, just as Gaia was the earth itself. Both are personifications, meaning they were both their assigned domain and a being of their own. So Gaia gave birth to the sky, which is Uranus, and he's described as if he were clothing, a perfect fit, which works because Gaia and Uranus will go on to create pretty much everything after them. As for the firm foundation for the blessed gods, this could refer to the creation of Olympus itself, or it could refer to the pairing being the parents of everything. Hesiod continues, and she bore the mountains in long ranges, haunted by the nymphs who lived in the deep mountain dells. Then she, referring to Gaia, gave birth to the barren, raging sea. The sea here is capitalized, meaning it's important. The translator for this version likely translated it directly. I know that this was a mistake in the translation because it did the same earlier with Hemera, or day. It's possible these gods weren't named yet, or it was a translation error. The sea is named Pontus, the personification of the sea. Not to be confused with Poseidon, the god who rules over the sea. Anyway, she gave birth to the raging barren sea without any sexual love, so she created him alone. But later she slept with Ouranos and bore the ocean. Ocean is Oceanus. He is the first of the Titans, but also treated as a personification here with the following text. Bore ocean with its deep currents. Sounds like a person and an ocean, right? The end of this chapter of the poem is, and also Koios, Krios, Hyperion, Iapedos, Thea, Rhea, Themis, Nemenosine, gold-crowned Phoebe, and lovely Tethys. This just refers to all the Titans being born. Most of the Titans don't have a myth, or any myths tied to them, and only exist to pad out the generation that Kronos and Rhea were born into. They're kind of filler characters to justify Kronos' existence. Kronos and Rhea were Titans that gave birth to the first generation of Olympians, and likely where you first started learning Greek mythology in school. That's the end of the first story in the Theogony, the creation myth in Greek myth. The only issue with this one, when compared to other creation myths, is that it doesn't really fit too well with the Orphic myth that came before. There's no mention of Phanes or the Orphic egg, and Chaos gave birth to the first generation alone, and no mention of Kronos, the time primordial. So there's a lot missing here, or at least it doesn't match cleanly with the others, so when you're reading other creation myths, try to keep an open mind about it, because you'll find that Hesiod's, while incredibly useful, doesn't fit perfectly with the rest of these myths. It was important that I covered the Theogony, at least a little bit, because of how many times I referenced it in the iceberg, so hopefully you're a lot less confused about what the Theogony is. There are lots of other useful myths here in the Theogony, so if you'd like to hear me talk about the castration of Ouranos, Prometheus, the Titanomachy, Pandora, and Mora, let me know by giving me a like or leaving a nice comment. Like, put a comment of a gem emoji to let me know that you liked it, and I'll see you next time. Stay funky!